Before we start this video, if you haven't prayed yet, pause the video and come back when you're done. Anyways, hello internet. I'm Dev Jr. ابن طارق ابن الفاروق ابن عمر ابن بنجس ابن موسى ابن يونس ابن تيمية ابن الصديق ابن محمد ابن خلدون ابن وليد the first. A few months ago, I was in a terrible state. I was falling in a bunch of sins and my mental state was terrible. And when I go back to it, I realized that I was listening to a bunch of music. All the genres. Sad music, happy music, horror music, gay music, meme music, everything. And if you don't know, music is haram in Islam. As there is a hadith about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that says, "From among my followers, there will be some people who will consider illegal sexual intercourse, aka zina, the wearing of silk, the drinking of alcohol, and the use of musical instruments as lawful, meaning that they were unlawful or forbidden. So all musical instruments are forbidden, except something called the duf, with it also having a lot of restrictions. So as a result, music itself is forbidden. But what is music? To understand what is music and why Islam forbade it, we have to understand what is a sound in the first place. A sound is basically just a bunch of air particles being compressed and rarefied from the source until it reaches your ears. But let's actually see how it works. For simplification, I'll just line a bunch of air particles over here, each being in a state of lowest energy, aka not too compressed or stretched, and I'll just kick one of them. The air particle will be pushed to the one next to it, and both will be pushed to the one next to them. And as you can see, we have three regions now. A neutral region, a compressed region where the particle density is much higher, and a refracted region where the particle density is much lower. Anyways, let's continue. The particle in the middle now is condensed between two other particles, and it really wants to go back to its normal state, so it'll just push both particles. The first particle will be pushed back to its original position, the middle particle will go back to its original position, the third particle though will be pushed away, causing another compression, then the case would repeat. Now, if I kept on kicking the first particle periodically, I'll start to cause a chain of compressions and refractions. That chain is what we call a sound. And because I'm doing it periodically now, we can start to make it look like a sine-cosine wave. Now, the sine-cosine form is what we call a transverse wave, and the compression-refractions form is what we call a longitudinal wave. But at the end, they're both waves, and that gives sound a few properties. First of all, the amplitude, which represents the intensity of the sound. The higher it is, the more intense the sound is. Then we have the frequency. It means how many cycles happen per second, aka how many times I can compress and stretch the thing per second. Now, replace me with a guitar string or a flute. When I pull the string, it starts to vibrate. These vibrations will cause the string to hit the air particles periodically. And depending on the frequency and how much I pull the string, a different sound will be made. A speaker, for example, is basically a vibrating machine that vibrates at a certain frequency and intensity based on whatever we give it. Your voice in itself works the same way. Here we have something called the vocal cords. They are two soft folds stretched across your throat. When you're breathing normally, these folds are open, so air just passes through them. But when you talk, you flex them, causing them to stretch and get stiff, so the air coming out will be in their way, causing them to vibrate. The more they're stretched, the faster they vibrate, aka the higher frequency or pitch, and vice versa. Now currently, the only thing we're producing is a buzzing sound like so your tongue, lips, and nasal cavity start to affect the wave, which shape the sounds into vowels and consonants. Now this is the case for any sound source. We play with a bunch of factors that, at the end, will result in a longitudinal wave at a certain frequency and a certain intensity. I really want to create a simulation or something just for the topic of sound waves, but we'll leave that for another video. Anyways, these pressure changes keep on traveling until they reach a microphone somewhere. They will cause something called the diaphragm to vibrate in the same frequency and intensity as the sound. Now, the vibrations of the diaphragm will at the end cause voltage changes, which are recorded and encoded into the sounds in our devices, like the one you're hearing right now. It's a bit more complicated than that, but for now, you just have to know that a microphone turns the pressure changes into electrical signals. Sound familiar? Your ears are a much more fascinating creation. When the sound wave reaches your ears, the eardrum starts vibrating with the same pattern. Those vibrations will move three tiny points inside, which we call the ossicles: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Here, the waves get amplified, and then the stapes will transmit these waves by pressing in an area called the oval window. The oval window is a part of something called the cochlea, which is a spiral shell filled with fluid. Now, to make this simpler, imagine we have a room filled with fluid and a window with three people outside. These three people are the ossicles. Sound waves travel through them like how they knock on each other's backs. The amplifications is basically just knocking harder. Anyways, the stapes will start to knock on the oval window in the same pattern as the sound waves. This will cause ripples in the fluid. Along the cochlea, there are rows of hair cells, with each cell tuned to a certain frequency. When the fluid wave matches that frequency, those hair cells will bend, causing electrical impulses. These impulses will travel somewhere called the auditory cortex in the brain, which will then decode the waves into pitch, loudness, rhythm, direction, etc. So basically, your hearing system is just a very advanced biological microphone. Now, this topic has brought my attention to something. Sometimes people have a faulty eardrum, and other times they don't even have the nerves necessary to hear. You realize what that means? Some people have never heard a sound in their entire life, not even the background noise you hear in a silent room. Some people have never listened to the rain, the flow of water, the wind, the cute animal noises, or even an I love you from their parents. So Allah has given us a great blessing. But how do we use it? Do we listen to the Quran? Do we listen to beneficial content for our deen or dunya? Or do we waste it on swear words, brain rot, haram content, shirk, and especially music? Now, the simplest sound is a sine wave. This doesn't really sound anything like music, but if I start to add different frequencies, a beat will be formed. Basically, music is just a mix of frequencies. But how does it affect the brain? Your brain is an electrical device. Everything in it works by transmitting electrical signals in oscillations. Brain waves are the electrical oscillations in the brain in their natural rhythm. When we listen to music, the brain gets interrupted by a designed flow of electrical signals that override the natural rhythm of the brain, and depending on the frequency of these oscillations, we have different moods. That's why music is so powerful. It literally works as a hijacker for the brain. So it basically just goes in the same frequency, takes over your brain, and then it drives it to however it's designed. And that's the problem, because music literally forces you into a state where your subconscious is much more vulnerable. So let's say if I deliver some terrible ideas in the song, like lust, violence, betrayal, sadness, etc. Or not just that, literally just use a specific frequency for sadness, and the message will be delivered. So it literally works as a method for hypnosis. And that's actually pretty dense in our reality. One thing that games do is that they play with the music and sound design so they addict the player. Things like the bell clang, the pop sound, the whoosh. That's what we call Skinner box. Same thing with malls and restaurants, where they enable sounds with certain frequencies to tune in customers. When you listen to music repeatedly, the rhythm of the music starts to become your natural brain rhythm. And that's why even after turning it off, it keeps playing in your brain. But eventually, the flow will start to decrease, and that gives us another problem. When your brain starts to adapt to the music, it will start to build associations with it using hormone, and especially dopamine. Now, dopamine, as we discussed in the last few episodes, is the reason for most terrible mental states, because the body tolerates it quickly, and that music will eventually start to get boring. So you'll try new genres, different themes, and depending on the frequency of the music, it might cause you depression, anxiety, etc. until it becomes necessary for you to function. And that's why quitting is so hard. Your body craves to be at the same level of dopamine as before, so it will try anything to turn you back. And it doesn't fully go away, as it still lingers in your memories, causing more anxiety. Now, some people might say, well, why don't I just listen to happy music, Sam? And that's another problem. All this time, we have been talking about how music is terrible from just a logical standpoint. And even happy music won't suffice because after the addiction, you'll start to tolerate it and you'll go back to either terrible music that will cause you depression, or because you don't have anything else, you'll get depressed because you don't have anything else to listen to. But an even bigger problem is how music will ruin your religion. Whoever listens to music can't and will not be able to enjoy Islam and the Quran. They won't be able to focus in prayer. They will look at people that literally cry from a few verses in confusion because they can't feel anything. And that returns us to a nickname we give music: food for the soul. The soul. The soul, that's the problem. The soul or the heart is the thing that determines emotions and all the other feelings. It's like an empty cup that we fill it with something that will then spill into our mood and emotions. Music and the Quran can't stay in the same heart. That's just not possible. Both are very different types of food for the soul. And there's a verse in the Quran that says, ما جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه. Allah has not made for a man two hearts in his interior. There is only one heart. You either fill it with Quran and the remembrance of Allah, or music. And music, as we discussed, is a haram addictive source that will eventually result in things like depression and anxiety. And if it was coupled with any haram ideas like hate speech, cheating, betrayal, lust, zina, etc., those ideas will take the listener as a vessel and it will start to affect their actions. So let me ask you, would you relate to music on the day of judgment? If not, then let's change that. Alright, so what we need to do is to detox our brain from music. And here I'm talking about all types of music, even the background music for most videos. Because we now have quit music, your brain is left without its usual dopamine source. So we will replace that gap with things like the Quran or nasheeds or podcasts or nature sounds. Replace it with anything halal to fill in the gap your brain is used to. And try to avoid triggers as much as possible. Try not to hang in places where music is blasting. I know it's difficult with gyms, malls, cafes, etc., but try to put on your earphones and turn on anything beneficial. And I know, nothing will feel better than music at the start. But it's like smoking. Nothing will feel better than smoking for a quitter at the start. But as time goes on, they will start to feel free from their addiction. And that feeling alone is enough. You will be able to see the beauty in the other things that were going over your head. And if you fell once, get up and quit again. And if you fell again, get up again. And if you fell up 1,000 times, get up 1,001 times. Islam doesn't want you to be the perfect that doesn't do anything wrong. It wants you an awab, aka frequently returning to Allah. And that reminds me, the most important step here is to make dua. You can't do it alone. Wallahi, you can't. But if you ask Allah sincerely, He'll make it easy for you and you'll start to feel a peace way better than what music ever gave. And that was my video PSA on music. Don't forget to pray, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.